Hey guys, it's Angli Et Nex here again, and today I'm going to show you my PVE Justice Healadin build. I was recently light spec, but it turns out my team has outgrown the heals. They don't necessarily need all that healing anymore as they increase in item level, so I changed my spec to Justice Feat path to offer them a little bit more buffs and extra utility when it comes to endgame content, running dungeons, and even running through the new campaign areas. So let's get into the build, and I hope you enjoy it. As you can see, I am a Paladin Oath of Devotion. I am a human, and I am just over 3,000 item level. Basically, what I'm running here is a configuration of my own design. I'm running Plague Fire, running Shadowclad. I'm running a 3-piece Dragonflight set. I'm just missing the chest piece. And I'm running the Twisted Weapon set with a Plague Fire, and I'll show you the Plague Fire here. So I'm running a perfect Plague Fire, helps out tremendously as a tank, and this next Elder Refinement is going to be going up even more. So I'm running the Cleric Sigil, Waters of Elzod, Thane Book of the Dead, and the Tiamat's Orb of Majesty. The reason I'm running these is for the action point gain, the power, the recovery, and even more power and defense, and the increased healing bonus that you get from the sigil, along with increasing the amount of AP that you gain when using the sigil. I'm using the Greater Plated Band of Khan just to add a little extra more hit points, a personalized ring, and a +4 rising deflect with the Amulet of Tiamat's Demise on my neck, just because it gives more power, recovery, and defense, all the stats that we need as a Healadin. And now, as you can see for stats, I've got 22,000 power, 16k defense, and 8,000 recovery with 1,300 action point gain. It works out pretty well this way when I power share. Just by standing alone by myself with no buffs, I power share for more than 5,000. So your main stats are not going to be con per se. You're going to build a little bit into con, but your main stats are going to be wisdom for that bonus healing, and then charisma for the stamina regen and action point gain. And the reason for this is the con gives you extra hit points, so that helps us not get one shot as often. And then obviously action point gain, stamina regen. We're going to be using up our stamina a lot just from having Sanctuary up, which helps out with healing. And then the action point gain helps us out in place of recovery. I don't necessarily need as much recovery because healing generates a lot of AP for me. So I'm sitting pretty much at 6 seconds for a perma daily at this point with this stats. For powers here, as you can see, I'm using Radiant Strike on my left trigger. Now you could obviously swap this out for Cure Wounds, but with the amount that my heals are hitting for at this point in time, I don't necessarily need that extra heal, so I take a little bit of the extra damage with Radiant Strike. For running dailies, running solo, I use Burning Light. One, because it adds a burning effect, and if you have the Owlbear Cub, this procs like crazy. Divine Judgment, this is my main daily that I use, just because I don't need to use my Shields of Faith as often, so I drop Divine Judgment, or the Pally Hammer as it's been deemed, pretty much all the time, unless there's those situations like Orcus fight where people are starting to get hit pretty hard. Aura of Courage, 3 points in here. I switch off to this when I am doing my solo runs just to increase damage. You can run Sacred Weapon as well, even in your dungeon rotation. It does not generate a whole lot of AP, but does generate some extra theft because you're dealing more damage. Smite, you could use Smite in place of Relentless Avenger in your dungeoning as well, but I mainly use it for solo. Heroism, I just put points in it to build down. Bane, this is another option for those endgame boss fights. A lot of the great weapon fighters, Scourge Warlocks, want to see Bane on there to get that 30% extra damage against the boss. If you can find a slot for it to swap out something and put that on, that is a good thing to use for group comp. Aura of Vengeance, this is the other personal that you will use for running solo, just to increase damage. Oath Strike, this is the main thing that we use, main at will that we use, and it's because that the final hit of this 3-strike combo heals us, which then lets off a burst of healing. So that helps out a lot. Templar's Wrath, you could use this if you're running some quick runs like Kessels, things like that, just for extra mob clear damage, things of that nature. Or if you just want to have fun with it and buff up your team with some extra hit points. This also, Aura of Wisdom, more for those fun runs, just to reduce cooldown. But Bond of Virtue is going to be your main healing with this build. It is a main passive. You have to toggle it on, but don't ever toggle it off on purpose. Sometimes it does get toggled off when you get stunned, but always make sure you have this on because this is the main brunt of your healing. Aura of Restoration. Basically, this makes it anyone within the 30-foot radius of you takes more healing from you. So they take increased incoming healing. So that just increases your healing numbers. And obviously, here's Cure Wounds. You could use this on your left trigger instead of Radiant Strike, but like I said, with my build set up how it is right now, I don't necessarily need it as much. Shield of Faith, this is my second daily. Again, like I said, I use this on like Orcus, things like that, because of the 30% increased damage reduction and the 30% incoming healing. Makes it a little bit easier to manage Orcus if you have this on. Divine Touch, just building. Vow of Enmity, this almost never leaves my bar just because it acts like an Astral Seal, and then when you've got 4 points in it, you get 50% increased damage against that target. So running your solo stuff, running your dailies, mark your targets, and just smash them. Healing Font. You could use this if you don't want to use a damaging daily like Divine Judgment. Healing Font, I've used it more in dragon fights, like fighting green dragon, blue dragon that have a lot of AoEs. So you just drop this on the ground and let it do its thing. It'll heal, and it heals actually really, really well. Aura of Life. This is a staple for this build just because it allows you to pick people up without actually having to do the action of picking people up. And when you pick them up, they get increased hit points when you pick them up. Relentless Avenger. I use this in dungeons if people don't mind me throwing stuff around a little bit. But this is your huge, huge, huge AP generating attack. Circle of Power, again, this is more for big boss fights. If you're having issue with people getting one shot or having low defense, you could throw this on just to make it a little bit easier and increase damage resistance. Jumping right into feats here. Obviously, 3 of 3 in toughness. The more HP we have, the better, because we tend to draw a little bit of aggro just by our nature. Healing does draw aggro, and because we are a paladin, we draw aggro. So that helps with a little bit of survivability. I only put 2 of 5 here. One, because it is still a little bit bugged, where you don't necessarily need the full 5 points. But, and the second point is that with my healing as it is right now, I don't pop my Divine Call as often probably as I should. So that's why I put 2 of 5 in there. Increase the recharge speed of your powers by 6%. Your at wills deal 4% more damage, so I put 2 points here. 2 points out of 3, you get 4% increase incoming healing, so this just helps you with your sustain, keeping yourself alive. And then you generate more Divine Call energy, so that just helps you proc your Divine Call. And here's where being a human helps out a lot. Getting those 3 extra feat points, you could either put them here or you could put them in the first one for the extra Divine Call AP generation, but I put them here just for the extra con. just because it adds more HP to the build. And then here, more healing based on the amount of wisdom that we have. So we're trying to heal, that's what we need to do. And then obviously the 3 staples for light feat path: heals 10% more, 10% more recovery from your gear, and then 25% power share to your team. So like I said before, at 22k power, I heal for I power share for over 5,000. So that makes it nice. Swift Flash, when you get struck, you gain a 30% movement speed increase. I took this just because the other option is control strength, and we're not trying to tank or control, so we don't necessarily need the control strength. And then Flash of Light, your encounter powers have 25% chance to reduce the cooldown of your other encounter powers that are on cooldown by 10%. So that helps us out a lot, gets our things off cooldown a lot faster. Your presence, just by your presence, you help your allies to have reduced cooldowns. So just by you being there, you're giving your teammates 5% cooldown reduction. And then Echo of Light, your at-will powers have a 10% chance to trigger an echo on you, which immediately cools down one of your encounter powers, thus making you be able to heal, thus making you be able to generate more cooldowns for your team. So you're healing you're healing them, you healing you heals them. If you don't want to take that one, you can take Beacon of Hope. Whenever they take damage, if they are within your sphere of influence, they are healed for 250% of your weapon damage every 2 seconds. But I went with the Echoes of Light just because it helps us out, gets our stuff off cooldown a lot faster. And then obviously the bread and butter is Prism. Whenever we activate a daily, whenever we heal ourselves, we do a burst of healing around us that does a heal over time. This is what procs the majority of our healing because the 3rd strike of Oath Strike heals us. And then here you've got Divine Call. You increase your damage dealt by 35% when enemies are affected by Divine Call. And the only reason why you would probably want to proc this, as it is right now, is to reduce the cooldowns of your encounter powers. So that helps us out a lot, getting things off cooldown, healing, doing a little bit more damage, and then obviously spamming it, you do a burst heal and more AP for you. Obviously, as you can see, I haven't really even started Storm King yet, but I'll still go through this to show you what ones you want to take. So I would go with the 2% lifesteal just because we don't necessarily need the control resistance. So 2% lifesteal, 1,000 hit points. And I would do incoming healing only because when you heal yourself, you heal others. You gain 2,000 recovery based on the amount of stamina guard gain you're missing. That helps us out a lot. And then 3,200 extra hit points. And then this one here, your healing abilities have a chance to hit for 6,000 damage on 5 enemies around you. We are healing all the time, so that's some pretty big ticks that could be coming off just by you doing your healing abilities. Sharandar here, power, 400 deflect, 3% action point gain, and I went with the 20,000 arcane damage just because I don't necessarily need to heal myself as much. And then Elvish Fury, sacks of power, equal more damage, more healing. 250 power, 400 lifesteal, 3% resistance ignored. And then this one is when you are struck, you heal yourself or have a chance to heal yourself for 20,000. When that subsides, you gain 4,000 defense. And then here is Rampaging Madness, where you could either use that one, Rampaging Madness, or this one here. Your healing spells have a chance to burn your targets for 2,000 radiant damage. But me as a power share pally, I'm going to go with Rampaging Madness because that extra 4,000 power that I get just means my team gets more power. Icewind Dale, 400 AoE resist just to add a little bit more sustain to the build. 400 incoming healing, again, healing ourselves heals everybody else. 400 recovery, because we need more recovery. And you gain 2000 power based on the stamina guard you're missing. This helps us out a lot because we're going to be using Sanctuary quite often, so our stamina is going to be pretty low. So we're going to keep that 2000 power up quite a bit. So you could do any one of these really, other than the health potions one. You could do Avalanche, you could do when killing a foe you have a chance to gain action points, but you're not going to kill a whole lot unless you're just running by yourself. So you could probably do, when you heal, you deal up to 3000 damage on your next attack, or do Avalanche. I would say one of those two. Probably healing is going to do more for you than the Avalanche will, but that's just the way it goes. 400 power, 400 crit strike, action point bonus, or combat advantage bonus, sorry. Just because regen doesn't work in battle. And then again, I went with control impairing effects are reduced by 5% because the longer our stamina is down, the more power we sustain from the Icewind Dale boon. So yes, it means we might do less healing, but it means we do more power share. And then straight out, gain 10% more damage against demons. Tyranny of Dragons, 400 power, 400 deflect, 400 armor pen, 400 lifesteal rating, and then 15% increased healing. So we heal ourselves, it heals them, which heals us, which heals them. It's a vicious circle. Guild boons, power, defense, and revive sickness. Those are the main three that you're going to use. Maze Engine, you're going to go 400 incoming healing, 400 combat advantage bonus, and then 3% more action points. And then you could do this one, heal your allies for 20,000, just to keep your healing numbers up a little bit more. But yeah, that's probably what I would run. And then 300 power, 200 hit points, 4% lifesteal severity, 2,000 hit points, 400 recovery, 2,000 hit points. And then this one here, when you take damage, it's a 24k heal. When that subsides, you gain a 1,000 recovery. We're going to jump into companions now. As you can see, my bonding companion is a Shadow Demon. I'm running the Sylph, the Fire Archon, the Wind Archon, and the Earth Archon. The reason I have the Earth Archon is because there are times when maybe your tank isn't as good as he thinks he is, and you can throw this guy out there to help tank a little bit. Air Archon is mainly just for the damage, extra damage for the build. And then I have a Fire Archon, 1 for the damage, and 2 because I switch back and forth depending on what I need for my bondings. But since Mod 11 is coming out and Underdark rings aren't going to proc off your companion, I'm basically just moving to my Shadow Demon just because I don't have any rings. Companion or my Shadow Demon doesn't use rings. The Sylph for the 50% control resist. I know control resist isn't a big deal in PvE, but you actually notice a pretty big difference when you have that 50%. It helps out a lot, especially just in some dungeons where you're jiving, you're in the groove, and all of a sudden an assassin stuns you or something, you're right out of it pretty quick. My Shadow Demon deflects do almost no damage to us and reflect 6,000 damage, and it hits like a truck. Not as much as it used to, but it adds, when it hits hard, it's like 60,000 damage. So on the mounts here, I'm using Victim's Preservation. When I take 35% of my max health and damage and pre-mitigated damage, I heal myself. That just helps to prevent some of the one-shots. And then Protector's Camaraderie. When my companion attacks, I gain power and defense. Gladiator's Guile, movement speed, faster dungeons. Shepherd's Devotion. When I use it daily, you guys, my team, gains defense, deflect. And then Wanderer's Fortune, obviously, just for refinement purposes. So what I'm going to show you is the two basic rotations that I use, the dungeon rotation and my soloing rotation. I don't even have a companion out right now, but I will start off with my dungeoning rotation. So as you can see, Vow of Enmity is on my X, Relentless Avenger is on my Y, and Bond of Virtue is on my B. You can see it flashing, that means it's on. That will never be off unless someone else turns it off. So you just want to leave that on all the time. So basically what you're going to start off with is marking your target with Vow of Enmity, and then jump to him with Relentless Avenger, and then do a couple of swings just to proc your weapon enchantment, and then you can drop Divine Judgment. I generally like to use Vow of Enmity right before I use a hammer, drop Divine Judgment, just so that you get the full effect, the full 50% on your Divine Judgment. It's your hardest hitting ability, so that's generally what I like to do. And as you can see, my daily comes back very quickly even without using my sigil. And that's really without anything even to heal around me. This is just proccing off what I'm healing myself and Relentless Avenger. So now what I'll show you is the solo powers that I use and the general rotation. Put on Aura of Courage, Aura of Vengeance, use Smite instead of Bond of Virtue, and then I use Burning Light instead of Relentless Avenger. You can keep Relentless Avenger on. I just find it makes it harder when you're throwing stuff around to try and kill stuff yourself, just because we don't deal the massive amount of damage to keep up with it. So same basic premise. You'll want to try to use Vow of Enmity right before you use a hammer, drop Divine Call or Divine Judgment, and then just go through your rotations as they come off cooldown. They'll come off at kind of random times because of the way that the cooldown function works of the Justice Feat path, but generally you can just keep in that same rotation. Use Burning Light kind of to open, and you can run up and use this in any kind of mob. Even in Bryn Shandar, you can run in there and you're not going to take a whole lot of damage. So run in there, use Burning Light, use Smite, Vow of Enmity, drop your Divine Judgment, and rinse and repeat. And obviously you can activate your Divine Calls to deal more damage and generate some AP for yourself. But that's basically it, guys. Once again, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything of that nature, don't be afraid to leave a comment below. Stay tuned for more content. I will be posting a full dungeon run of this build later on. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for other builds. Thank you guys for watching.